Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. I happen to really respect and revere Douglas Murray, and I love his takes on many things. The only things that I think Douglas Murray and I would differ on would be obviously Christianity and homosexuality, because as we know, Douglas Murray claims to be a homosexual and an atheist at that as well. Although in recent times, I've been seeing a little bit of a shift with Douglas and him starting to see the world for what it really is. You know, the whole notion of good versus evil. He's seen lots and lots of evil. And I think Douglas was brought up in somewhat of a Christian kind of environment. And it's also interesting to me because you have someone like Douglas Murray who doesn't claim to be a Christian at all, not even in the slightest. And he is coming to the defense of Christians that have been persecuted by Muslims, by Islam. He's coming to the defense. And I wonder about this quite considerably because I'm seeing lots more atheist, Jewish people, some Christians, but not a lot of Christians, not a lot of pastors, not a lot of leaders, not a lot of, I guess the Pope wouldn't talk about this. Not many people would actually, that claim to be part of the Christian faith, we'll use that, part of the Christian faith, want to really speak up or speak out against Islam. And here is an 8-minute long masterclass of Douglas Murray talking about why many religious leaders won't talk about the atrocities that have happened over in the Congo or in Syria or in Nigeria. Their own brothers and sisters in Christ being killed, but yet they're silent. Have a watch.
I'm Douglas Murray. This is Direct Address. In recent weeks I've been travelling in Ukraine, among other places, but I wanted to talk today about a story which I think has had far too little attention, but which has been much on my mind. That is the situation of the persecuted Christian churches, particularly in the Middle East and in Africa. In recent weeks, in one incident alone in Congo, 70 Christians were abducted and beheaded by Islamist militia. That's just on one occasion. In more recent days, in Syria, the ancient Christian churches of that country have once again been under attack. It turns out that the Islamists who now run Syria aren't that great or greatly concerned about protecting Christian minorities, and who could have seen that coming? But the real question about all this, which I hear from many people, including many readers, is why is there so little attention to this? Why is there so little news or reaction to atrocities like those I just described? And it's a good question, but it's one to which I think there is a rather obvious answer. You might not have noticed, but there actually isn't an Archbishop of Canterbury at the moment. It's quite an easy thing not to notice that. But if you do go to the ongoing social media threads of Lambeth Palace and so on, you'll find the usual pabulum. You'll find a lot of interfaith stuff, you'll find a bit of green stuff thrown in, of course, but next to nothing about the persecuted Christians of Syria, of Congo, and elsewhere. It's a very strange thing to my mind. It's an odd thing to skip. There is a pope at the moment. He's not well and could be forgiven for not being more outspoken perhaps for the time being, but it's still rather striking to me that the Roman Catholic Church also remains relatively silent about the killing and persecution of members of its own faith community. People say, well, how could this be? And I think in actual fact there's a very straightforward reason, which is worth lingering on. That's that they're scared. They're very scared. And arguably they have some right to be. The Christian church has a long memory, but You don't have to have an especially long memory to go back to 2006. That's when the then Pope, Benedict XVI, gave his famous Regensburg Address. That address was a remarkable piece of work. Benedict, among other things, talked about the intersection of faith and reason. He talked about many things of great depth, but in the course of his remarks, he just quoted, a 14th century Byzantine emperor who said something disobliging about the way in which Islam had been spread as a religion from the beginning, noting, by the way, that Islam had very often been spread by the sword. Pope Benedict made it clear that he wasn't in any way endorsing the comments that he was quoting, but the reaction suggested that, in fact, the quotation from the 14th century Byzantine emperor wasn't that far off. As usual, it seemed that people around the world who were offended by the Pope citing this Byzantine emperor were doing that usual thing of saying, you've got to say my religion is peaceful, otherwise I might kill you. And indeed, there were attacks on Christians in the wake of the Regensburg Address around the world. In the West Bank and in Gaza, Palestinian Muslims attacked Christian churches. In Iraq, Assyrian Christians were also attacked and kidnapped and killed. And in Somalia, a 65-year-old Italian nun was killed by some brave jihadists who, again, were trying very hard to prove the peacefulness of their particular faith. In the wake of that response, that violent response to the Regensburg Address, Pope Benedict, and indeed most of the Western churches, decided not to tread into this terrain again. And it's something which, in some ways, you couldn't blame them for. The Pope's own Foreign Office advisors seem to have told him that if he wanted to make sure that no 65-year-old Italian nuns were going to get killed again, then he ought to perhaps not be quoting anything about Islam. But still, the silence from so many leaders of the Western churches about the situation of Christians in the persecuted churches is a subject which is deeply, deeply troubling. It's something I've written about before and researched quite a bit. Some 8 years ago or so, I was in northern Nigeria speaking to the persecuted churches there. These are Christian communities of considerable faith who are daily being persecuted by Islamist militia, groups that, among other things, want to bring a caliphate across Africa. It's remarkable hearing their stories firsthand. These are communities who regularly get bombed out in their churches, hunted down in fields, shot, macheted, and much more. I was very moved when I was with those communities to hear them praying the Lord's Prayer and hearing the fervour and the reality that they brought to the line of the Lord's Prayer, deliver us from evil. They really knew whereof they spoke. 10 years ago, I reported on the plight of Iraqi and Syrian Christians who were being persecuted by ISIS that was then in the ascendancy. I remember speaking to one woman from the area who had managed to escape to the West, and she said to me that she thought the only way that the Christian churches could survive would be for them to move from Iraq and Syria and gain sanctuary in the West. I remember saying to her, don't you think that's going to speed up the process of the end of these churches? And she looked me in the eye and said to me, it's the end anyway. That's always stuck with me because, of course, if it was the case that the ancient churches of Iraq, Syria, and elsewhere were chased out, then you have to ask where they'd be chased out from next and what would happen to the countries that they left behind. But the real question comes back to that one, why is there so little attention to this? The answer is, it's a very strange position to expect people to speak up for you and your community more than you're willing to speak up for yourselves. And so long as Christian leaders in the West ignore the plight of their own churches, as long as Christian leaders in the West remain so silent when Christians are being chased out of countries, massacred, beheaded, butchered in their places of worship, it'll be the case that many people around the world will continue to say, well, if the church doesn't speak up for its own, why should we speak up for it? So it doesn't solve the problem, but it would begin to solve the problem if the heads of the churches in the West remembered their persecuted brethren and actually said something on their behalf and for them.
In simple, they're scared. I spoke about it in the last two videos that I made when it came down to criticizing Candace Owens. She won't criticize Islam because the vast majority of her audience members happen to be Muslim. They happen to be Palestinian supporters because she goes against Israel. It's the way things go. So she would definitely be scared of opening her mouth and supporting Christians that were definitely killed by Muslims. Can't criticize a particular faith that would call themselves peaceful. We're the religion of peace. It's a stark reality, isn't it? When you've got members of the Roman Catholic Church, which I think Candace Owens claims to be part of. And this is not just a rebuke about Candace Owens. This is about the rebuke of the Catholic Church and many other faith sections that won't talk about what's going on with the persecuted church or persecuted Christians by Muslims over in Syria or in the Congo. They're scared. They won't speak up. They won't speak out about it because they know the repercussions of what would happen even if they did. We look at their history. Every single time someone speaks up about it, they are destroyed. But when Muslims are supposedly attacked, the world doesn't shut up about it. When Christians are attacked and killed for their faith, silence. Even from members of that same faith. It's because fear will get people to do nothing. Because that's exactly what it is. It's fear. Crippling. Stops people from doing what is right. Even though they know they probably should speak up. It's not easy to speak up about what's going on. Because you know that if you do speak up about this, about what's going on, you're going to get attacked. Douglas Murray has more than likely been ridiculed and attacked by people that hate his guts for doing that. Jordan Peterson, another one. Sam Harris, another one. There are countless individuals that I know, Gad Sad, they receive death threats on a regular basis for speaking up. So why is it that I'm seeing lots more atheists, some, not many Christians? Because they're the ones that are doing the right thing, despite the fear. What's right is to speak up about the persecuted church. What's not right is to remain silent about it. Until such time as the Roman Catholic Church or even whichever other religious organization that claims to be part of the Christian faith, if they want to speak up and speak out against what's going on, they got to be willing to take the hits that come as a result, the arrows. But everyone's so afraid of the reaction from Muslims that they don't do anything. And not doing anything is still doing something, and it's not good. You wonder why the mainstream media won't talk about this because the Christians have got no courage, but no bravery. No, Douglas Murray's got bravery. He's got courage. And he doesn't even claim to be Christian. I think Christians need to get a little bit more of a backbone. Start defending the faith properly. Because I guarantee you, our fellow brothers and sisters in Christ, they went to their grave. There was a man that I saw, he refused to take off his cross. And so they beheaded him. Right then and there. He refused to take off his cross. Because to him, that was far more important. Christ was far more important to him than death. Because he knew he would definitely die, but he'd much rather die than reject or deny Christ. That is courage. Some people may disagree with me, but I think it's courage. Christ's disciples went to their gruesome deaths preaching Christ's name. There's something to that. Paul, same deal. He was killed. It was attempted to be killed so many times. He still bravely went because he knew that's the right thing to do. It's what God commanded him to do. Anyway, that's enough from me, but you guys take care, be blessed, and I'll see you all in the next video.